Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I am Tammi Mack on Foxsoul. So President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris took office on January 20th, 2022, which means they have been in office for roughly 15 months, a little over a year. According to a recent poll, Biden had an approval rating of 33%, and Harris had a 40% approval rating, according to the LA Times. The 2022 midterm elections is just 6 months away, and control of the United States Senate and House of Representatives are at stake. What do the president's low poll numbers mean for American Democrats? What do the president's poll numbers mean for Republicans? Better yet, what do poll numbers mean to America? Well, let's get down to business. The business of being Black today are Joe Biden's low poll numbers and what they mean for America. Please welcome Assistant Professor at the University of Central Florida, Dr. Larry J. Walker. Hi, Dr. Larry. How are you, Dr. Walker?
Hey, Tammi. Good to be back.
Thanks to be back. Thank you for being back. Democratic strategist and political commentator, Wakenya Clanton. Hi, Wakenya.
Hey, Tammi. How are you?
Good. Political commentator and YouTube host Sharice Lane is with us. Hi, Sharice.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And strategist and former Tennessee State Senator Katrina Robinson is on deck. Hi, Katrina.
Hi, Tammi. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Katrina, we're going to stay with you on this first question as we get started. We are the business of being Black, and I always like to know, why should Black people care? So why should Black people care about poll numbers, specifically Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's poll numbers, Katrina? Why should Black people care?
I mean, there's a lot at stake when we're talking about the president's approval rating when it comes to Black America. Right now, I believe everybody's main concern is the cost of living. And I know how the Black community can sometimes associate that directly with the presidential administration. And so I understand that Black America has a problem now as to whether or not this administration can pull it off for the rest of the term into leading into the next election. And so when Black America is looking at what has Biden done, we're accustomed to people getting in office and getting it done immediately. And what we have seen is a lot of compromise. There's been a lot of pullback on some of the initiatives that were brought forth during the campaign, and it causes some of our community to lose faith and trust in the election process and in government. And so I think there's a lot at stake here for Black America.
Sharice, why should Black people care about this administration's low poll numbers?
I think first we should care because we are just as a part of America as everyone else. We are American citizens. We matter. And I think that policy matters the most as well. You can't just say you're going to do something for Black America and then get in office and then push it off. You have to actually get something done. And that's why I think the poll numbers matter, because we matter. We are just as much a part of America as everyone else.
Black lives matter and poll lives matter. Wakenya, please let me know. Why should Black people care about these numbers?
Well, Tammi, thank you so much again for this opportunity to be on the show. And I think, my co-panelist here said it best. Black people should care, particularly about these polling numbers, because it will disproportionately impact us. The results of these midterm elections will disproportionately impact us. And it also gives us an opportunity for accountability. So when we reflect back on the previous administration, we saw what happened when we weren't in power. We saw what happened to our voting rights. We saw what happened to our court system. And so there's so much at stake for us as we think about the next several months to come. And so we can't afford to be apathetic and to lean out because so much is on the line for us.
Dr. Walker, why should Black people care?
Well, Tammi, they should care. And I think there are a couple facts we need to highlight. During the Trump administration, unemployment rate should have peaked at about 6.3%. We're at most recent jobs report at 3.6%, right? So that means folks in our community have found jobs since the Trump administration, their time ended and the Biden administration has come in. The other thing is, in terms of poll numbers and why Black folks should matter, is also the $1.2 billion infrastructure bill, right? And so some of these other issues, things that Black folks care about, there are other issues we should be cared about that haven't happened, right? So we're talking voting rights. We'll also talk about issues relating to policing. But we also have to remember that we have, 3 branches of government. So while we hear a lot of talk about bipartisanship, the White House, and particularly the Biden administration, and sometimes it can only do but so much when you have two moderate Democrats in the Senate side who won't agree to some of the issues that we know we care passionately about in the Black community.
You brought something up that made me think of poll numbers versus progress. Do poll numbers equal to progress? Because you talked about how the unemployment rate has actually lowered versus the unemployment rate for Black America when Trump was in office. But I don't think people really know that. People see the poll numbers and assume that the poll numbers are bad because things are bad. So do poll numbers equate to progress or the lack thereof, Dr. Walker?
Yeah, poll numbers matter because in November, we could see the House or Senate flip. So that's a different conversation in terms of some of the policy issues we just talked about that we know that they'll never happen, certainly under, like I said, if the House and Senate flip from Democrat to Republican. But, Tammy, I think one of the problems in our today's society, we saw this during COVID, is not just as relates to the Black community, but America in general. There's a lot of misinformation. And in addition to that, I think the Biden administration has really struggled to get their message out. When I talked about the infrastructure bill, people remember that it passed, but they don't know what it means for their lives, not only now, but over the next several years. That money just won't be spent over the next 6 months to a year. That money, we're talking about years later, when that bill will still be impacting communities throughout the United States. And like I said, that infrastructure bill will provide some Black folks with jobs.
Joaquina, I see you nodding in agreement here, but I do want to know, do poll numbers equate to progress? Do we look at the poll numbers and say, oh, these poll numbers are bad? Joe Biden obviously is not working out for America.
Tammy, that's such a good question. And what I would say is that poll numbers don't necessarily point to progress, but they do point to personalities and they do allude to impact. And so I think Senator Robinson said it earlier, people are responding to what they're experiencing right now. And it also depends on who's being surveyed in these polls as well. When you talk about a representative in a reflective government, you also have to think about the people who are being invited to be a part of the conversation, shall we say. We know historically, Black people and brown people have been underrepresented in these national polls. And so when you start talking about the decrease in job numbers, or you start talking about infrastructure, who are they talking to about these, about the performance of our president and our vice president? I would think that some folks, the 5 million people who've now been since afforded healthcare would say that they're doing an impeccable job when they haven't had that. The more than, and I think, my previous panelist here said that, we talked about the unemployment rate. Those people who've now been able to find jobs right here in America, on American soil, in this new environment, they would also say that the president is doing a good job. And so I think it really depends on who we're talking to, and also the personalities of the people that we're talking to. We have to also admit as Americans that there are a number of people out here who don't want to see a representative government. They don't want to see Black and brown people in leadership. They don't want to see the first Native American woman assume a secretary position. They don't want to see those things. And so if those are the people who are being surveyed and are asking about the progress of this president, they may find it unfavorable because it's less reflective of who they want to be, or how they want to be seen as Americans. And so I think, when we think about that, when we think about what we really mean when we say Americans, we're talking about all of us, not some of us. We're the collective. And so I think that's a part of what we're seeing in these poll numbers.
So, Katrina, why do you think President Joe Biden's ratings are so low?
Going back to your previous question, you asked, did poll numbers relate to progress? They don't really relate to progress. They relate to people's perception of progress.
Yes.
And so when you're talking about Black America, Black American respondents have also decreased in their approval of President Biden, as well as Latinos, as well as women. It has been across the board that his approval rating has dropped dramatically, and it's because of people's perception of what he has done while he's been in office. Now, there are certain issues that he really doesn't have any immediate control over. It's kind of like starting at the 100 feet behind everybody else in the race, because there was so much to undo by the previous administration. But, in our community, we want to see results. And the polling is a result of us not seeing those results, whether it has to do, and I know my previous panelist did say that the unemployment rate has dropped, but you still have businesses and employers who can't find people to come to work. And there's a reason behind that. And there's so many opportunities within the Black community to be impactful in this administration that we have missed the mark over these past 15 months. And I'm just hoping that we can pull it back.
Sharice, why do you think Joe Biden's numbers are so low?
I think it's because, like the previous panelists were saying, he's gotten into office, but he hasn't really done anything that he said he's going to do for Black people in America. He even said before he got into office that we were the very people that put him into office. And yet I see now that he's putting other people before the very people he said put him into office. So it's just a matter of him not really delivering on what he said he's going to do. And I know, he's only two years in office, but it doesn't take that long to get something done for Black people, especially something tangible.
So what do you think? What's an example of something that he's not done that he said he was going to do, and an example of something that he's done for other minority groups that perhaps didn't land on in the Black community?
Right. So I am a big advocate for reparations for Black Americans. And I know he has been asked the question whether or not he supported it. I know he said no, he doesn't really support it, but that reparations conversation and, reparations for other people, he's been talking about giving them reparations, and not really using the word reparations, but some form of tangibleness concerning reparations, basically.
Dr. Walker, why do you think his numbers are so low?
Well, the panel has made a good point about reparations. I think reparations is an important issue. We're seeing it.
It is an important issue, but one that's a little too long to talk about before this commercial break. So we'll hit it when we come right back on The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Foxsoul. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack on Foxsoul, where the business of being Black today is Joe Biden's low approval ratings. Please welcome Assistant Professor at the University of Central Florida, Dr. Larry Walker, Democratic strategist and political commentator, Wakinya Clanton, political commentator and YouTube host, Sharice Lane is with us, and strategist and former Tennessee State Senator, Katrina Robinson. Dr. Larry, we left off with you telling us or giving us some type of insight into why Joe Biden's numbers are so low. And I think we ended with reparations.
Yeah, I wanted to say, Tim, because I think it's important that, I think the topic of reparations in relation to Black community is an important one. We see what's happening in California just recently, a few weeks ago, in terms of, identifying who should receive reparations. So I want to first say I think this is an important issue. But in terms of, President Biden's approval numbers, obviously, like I said, we talked about the low unemployment rate. We talked about the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. I think we need to talk about some of the other issues that I think matter to Black folks. Let's remember towards the end of the Trump administration, there was no policy, really no consistent policy in terms of what we're doing relating to COVID. And I think at that time, less than 1% of people have been vaccinated or have been tested. We're now way above that in terms of percentage wise, and millions of other Americans have also got tested inoculated as it relates to COVID. And I want to highlight something very important as it relates to that. It's important because Black folks disproportionately die from COVID-19 or are still dying disproportionately from COVID-19. But as it relates to the connection between poll numbers and the reality is, I think it goes back to a point I made previously, Tammi, and the Biden administration has got to break through a lot of the rhetoric, and they have struggled to do that. Whether we talk about, conversations and other platforms, the propaganda and rhetoric is just rolling on an hourly basis. And they have really struggled, President Biden has struggled to really get his message out about the millions of jobs that have been created, the low unemployment rate, the number of Black folks in the community who have been inoculated, who otherwise, based on the past administration's behaviors, wouldn't have cared if Black folks Black folks died disproportionately from COVID. So he has to be able to go and talk about those issues, and not just at a podium, but you need to go to people. And I don't care if I know he's the president, but he needs to get old school because he's an old school politician. Lunch counters, schools, etc. He's got to do more of that. He shows a lot of empathy when he's out in the public, and he needs to hit the road, because if they don't, Democrats are going to face some serious challenges in November.
Yeah. Well, Wakinya, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree with Dr. Walker. I mean, when we talk about Black folks, yes, there are other things that are important to us aside from reparations, and reparations can come in a number of different forms as well. When we talk about the fact that, we have more equitable housing reforms that are coming under this president. We have more healthcare. Healthcare is more accessible and available to more people under this president. We have more jobs under this president. We have, judicial nominations. This president has appointed more people of color to the federal bench than any other president in our lifetimes. That is notable. And that's notable because when we talk about the battle that we're going to face with voting rights, that's going to be fought in the courts, not just the Supreme Court. It's going to be fought in the district courts as well. And so we have to have representation across the board. You know, I'm not saying that we're not due some type of penance from this country, but I think in the absence of that, there are so many other things that we can move on now, that need to move on now, that we should be talking about, particularly the federal courts as well as our voting rights, which we saw fail just a couple of months ago with this current government. And so I think there's much to be said about that. It's not something that the president and the vice president can do by themselves, but it's something that must be done.
Well, there are a couple of things that stand out in the Black community and I believe at this point in time, policing is at the top of Black people's list. Mm-hmm. And so when Black people hear that this current president is going to give more money to the police force, it doesn't sound like defunding the police or any offset title as to what that would mean. You know, he's giving money, he's funding the police. So that could certainly upset Blacks. The George Floyd Act hasn't been passed. That could certainly upset Blacks. The John Lewis Act, and we're just now getting that anti-lynching bill passed as well. Does Biden and his administration have anything to do with these things? Katrina?
Biden's administration has a lot to do with these things, Tammy. I think and let me go back. There's a big difference between campaigning and governing. And this administration has not transitioned from campaigning to governing under this term. And what's happened is President Biden made so many promises to the Black community as it relates to systemic racism and eradicating those things, whether it was promising to do a police oversight commission. That hasn't been done. They backed away from that in April of last year and said that we were going to focus on the George Floyd Act, which has yet to be passed. There have been a lag in appointments to the U.S. Attorney's Office across this country. Even the U.S. Sentencing Commission is still reeling with vacancies, and the Black community is still incarcerated for nonviolent crimes and low-level drug crimes, which President Biden did say that he was going to do over the clemency, the way that clemency is done, but he's yet to pardon anybody or commute any sentences. I think there's a lot that Black people are waiting to see happen under this administration, and we can get disillusioned to think that we're actually doing something when really we've spent so much time over these past 15 months pandering to different communities just to make sure that we have their approval and not really governing in a manner that is impactful to the Black community.
Yeah, speaking of pandering, Sharice, do you think Joe Biden is riding the line, kind of towing the line here to please both sides of the aisle, which is an old and traditional way of politicking, if you will? Today, no one seems to toe the line. You're either on one side or the other side. Is Joe Biden's policies and the way that he's running the government maybe hurting him a little bit in these polls?
I think it is. And I like the word that you guys use, pandering. I think it's not only him that's been pandering, but it's been a lot of other people and a lot of other politicians that always seem to want to pander to Black people specifically, but don't want to get any policy passed. And I think that's a huge problem, because if you're going to keep pandering, why are you even in office? You're in office to get things done for us, for our community. And if you're not doing it, there's no point in you being there.
Yeah. Dr. Walker, do you think that Joe Biden is kind of riding the fence here, trying to make everybody happy when we're in a day and age where that's just simply not possible?
Well, Tammi, let me say this is, I'm a former congressional staffer and worked on a number of campaigns like a number of my colleagues on the panel, and politicians want to get reelected. So, is there pandering in politics? Absolutely, always, right? But like I said, the Biden administration, I think it's important to understand that they're facing the biggest challenge coming in since World War II, right? So we have to contextualize this conversation. We talk about the pandemic.
When you say that, what do you mean, though? Be specific.
Well, yeah. So what I'm saying is, in terms of the challenge, the current challenge in the United States is counting. So when Joe Biden, when he became president, we basically in a recession. COVID was running rampant. The unemployment rate was over 6%. And, people were constantly losing jobs. And once again, Black people were disproportionately dying from COVID-19. So what have we seen since then? Well, we've seen the number of Black folks, millions of Black folks have been able to get, like I said, been able to get a COVID shot, hopefully both COVID shots and a booster. But also, like I said, when I talked about earlier, the unemployment rate. But we also have to focus on the fact that we want to talk about, recently confirmed Justice Brown Jackson, right? And my colleague talked about the federal judgeships. And also we had to talk about the Supreme Court justice. Now, I think for a lot of people, they can't see long term, and this certainly won't change the balance of the Supreme Court. But what it does is, it is a promise he made in South Carolina several months ago that he would, if he was elected president, select, and we would get confirmed the first Black woman as a Supreme Court justice. And he has done that. Now, sure, are there other issues they should deal with, including student loans, right? We need loan forgiveness, including me, Tammy. But the bottom line is
me and you.
all of us. Me too.
Everybody.
Yeah, don't think because we on TV, we not waiting on our waiver.
We waiting.
I want that. Let me be clear. I want that right now. So I want to be clear on that. But the bottom line is, like I said, I don't think, and off base a little bit, I don't think it's gonna apply to us in either form or fashion, though. Well, I hope it does. So
it's still being debated. I think it's still being debated. It's still being determined. There are some previous provisions under President Obama that were there for people who had been in nonprofit service or government service. There are some other conditions that they're trying to iron out now, which is why they keep delaying the deadline.
Got it. Go finish your thought, Dr. Walker.
No, I was going to say, I want to kind of piggyback on the point my colleague made. Listen, when you look at...
let's take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack on Foxsoul. And the business of being Black today is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's, let me be respectful, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris's low approval ratings. Oh my goodness. So let's just go back a little bit. President Barack Obama had a 60% approval rating in the months leading up to the end of his presidency. Do you think a president will ever have approval ratings that high again? Because in contrast, Donald Trump's final approval ratings before leaving office were at 34%, which is right about where Joe Biden's sitting now. The only problem is Joe Biden's not going out of office unless he's voted out of office. So, will this hurt? Will we ever get a president that we love 60% of America, like over 60%? Will that happen again, Katrina?
I mean, we ain't gonna get another Obama. Well, I won't. Let me be positive about it. Maybe we will. However, I think the one thing that we're missing is that there's still an opportunity for President Biden to redeem himself. There's a lot of opportunity. I know we spent a lot of time talking about COVID, but when we're talking about the Black community, and I'm a nurse as well, so I've spent time on the front lines of COVID, but I've also seen what chronic conditions do to Black America, whether it's hypertension, diabetes, end-stage renal disease. There's a lot of opportunity for President Biden to be impactful in these non-expansion states as it relates to Medicaid. People are looking for help. They're looking for ways to make ends meet, to keep their health intact while they're trying to find jobs, while they're trying to manage the cost of living. It's hard to choose between insulin and your groceries. It's hard for Black Americans to be able to take care of mama and then take care of what they have to do for their generation. And so there's a lot of opportunity for this president in the next 2.5 to 3 years to figure out where he can be most impactful to improve that rating. But to answer your question, 60% is a lofty goal for any president from this day forward.
Well, I think Ronald Reagan had quite the high approval rating.
That was before my time.
but I'll just add to that, though. I think when you ask the question whether or not we're going to get another president who can inspire us in the type of way, motivate us in the type of way that President Obama did, to echo Senator Robinson here, I'm hopeful that we will get that. I think when you're comparing previous presidents, I think it's really important to also compare conditions. And so when we talk about, no one had as much charisma as President Barack Obama, I think we all love to see it. We were all motivated by when he spoke, and whether we agreed or disagreed, we believed in what he was saying to us, right? We believed that it was possible. I'm not saying that that's not what we have here with President Biden and even with President Trump. I think they're just different types of leaders who are motivated by different things. And so their audience appeal and need to hear different things. I think with President Biden, he inherited a lot of chaos from, from a global pandemic to, social unrest across the country. We've had so many challenges. This president inherited so many challenges. So a lot of the things that he did promise on the campaign trail had to take a back seat to that. I mean, we're on the brink of World War III.
I hear that, Joaquina, but every president takes on a lot. So I'm beginning to get a little.
I think this is a little different though, Tammi.
Obama took a lot too. Obama carried a lot as well. Clinton carried a lot, and even Trump carried a lot into his presidency. So I think that's a part of being the president, right? Isn't that just a part of
absolutely. It wasn't to make an excuse. It was just to note the conditions. Obama did. He also, and I think what people sometimes forget this, he also inherited a pandemic. It was called Ebola. Right. But he had a responsible government. He didn't deprioritize infectious disease studies. He didn't, strip money from the CDC that would actually prepare us for moments like we walked into with that we saw under President Trump. Right. President Trump didn't have the same priorities around science. In fact, he debunked science on so many occasions. And so it kind of helped to see the misinformation that most Americans, in fact, adopted under that presidency. And so what you're seeing now is a learning curve for many of us as it relates to what responsible governance is, but also what we believe as Americans, right? What we trust. And so I think those are the things that I was pointing to, Tammi.
I definitely agree with you on that, because usually Americans don't necessarily have to worry about Ebola because it's taken care of under the radar. It's not something that, that we know about like we did COVID. And it was very clear when this COVID pandemic took place that the monies and the funds that were allotted for the CDC and for other medical issues and pandemics that happened to us, it was very clear that there was a lack of concern in that current administration's hands, for sure. Sharice, I think we all loved President Joe Biden playing Robin to Obama's Batman, but how do we feel about Kamala Harris's Robin? I mean, she's the Robin that we never see. What is going on with our vice president, and how is she playing a part in these low approval ratings?
The Robin part, I really don't think that she. Like the fact that she's basically just disappeared is kind of weird to me. I never really see her around anymore, even like around Joe Biden, not that much. But I don't think she's playing that big of a part that Joe Biden played with President Barack Obama. I personally don't think that. I think that she's more so in the shadows now, which I don't understand. Hopefully she comes out of the shadows and, does more appearances and gets more into the community. But that's my thoughts on that.
What has her role been, Dr. Walker? Go ahead, Katrina. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Katrina.
Tammi, let me say this. There was a lot of energy around Vice President Harris being elected because she is a Black woman. She's an HBCU grad. She's an AKA. But people are looking for results. And of course, being the vice president, your hands are kind of tied. It's kind of like being a person that's affixed to someone else it's kind of like being the person in the group project that doesn't really have a say-so because someone's just taking over the group project. And we've seen what's happened in her office with a lot of staff attrition. There have been some types of cleanup with her administration, basically trying to make it seem as if she has not been allowed to do her job. However, the vice president plays a big role, and there's a big difference in the Obama and the Biden administration in that Biden had so much more experience in government before becoming the vice president. Vice President Harris did not have that advantage, and so there had to be a larger learning curve. But I think that Black America is not as patient with Black women. First of all, let's be clear about that. And under this administration, we're looking for her to be the person that cleans up the mess. And that's just not her role.
Yeah, well, I mean, under Obama's administration, Obama lacked experience, I think is a factual statement. He lacked the experience. And obviously, I think everybody but Jesus lacks the experience of Joe Biden when it comes to being a part
You're right about that.
Right.
And that goes back to your other question too, though. Do polls equal progress? No, they equal people's perception of that person and their personality, as Kenya said. I mean, we love President Obama, so he left with a 60% approval rate. Biden is a snoozer. So, I mean, you're going to have what you have.
Yeah.
Can I comment on that a little bit too?
Let Sharice get in. Go ahead, Sharice.
About will we ever reach those poll numbers again? I'll have to disagree with everyone. I don't think we will, because we're not only in a different time. That was 2008 and 2012. We're now in a more advanced time when people have more access to social media, and they're seeing through a lot of the BS that a lot of these politicians are spewing out, and seeing other people's opinion on it instead of just commentators on television. So I don't know if we're going to get to those poll numbers, 60% approval rate that he had. I don't think we're going to get to that again. Also, because he made a historic step in becoming the first Black president of the United States. So I disagree. I don't think we're going to ever see that again. And especially with more access to social media that everyone has.
Yeah. Dr. Walker, what's interesting to me is usually the vice president, after the president's reign is over, we look to the vice president to run for presidency. Is this a situation that our vice president currently is in?
So let me highlight, I think this context matters. So my colleague highlighted some challenges that, Vice President Harris is, or, expectations. And it's essentially misogyny, which is the
intersection. Hold on to the expectations, because they're expecting me to go to commercial break right now. So we will be right back, and we'll kick it off with Dr. Walker's expectations on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Foxsoul. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack on Foxsoul, and the Business of Being Black today is President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris's low approval ratings, 30%. Not good. Dr. Walker?
Yeah, so I wanted to say a few things thoughts about VP Harris, right? So she's being held to a ridiculously high standard. And some of the reasons around why that's happening is misogyny, which is the intersection of sexism and racism, right? So Black women, now we just saw, a Supreme Court justice and Justice Brown Jackson be confirmed. But coming in, Vice President Harris is going to be held to a standard that no person could meet. And let me also highlight a couple of things, because people fundamentally understand the role of the vice president. So it is the Biden administration. Now, you talked about President Biden and former President Obama and Biden. So what happened is the VP is supposed to balance out the weaknesses of whatever presidential candidate you have. So we saw that in the last three presidents. But once again, Vice President Harris is being held to a standard. If she was a white male, she wouldn't be held to. And let's be clear about that, because I think that's really important.
Well, we just want to see her, though, Dr. Walker.
Well, hold on a second.
We're just asking to see her. What kind of standard is it to see her?
So let me say this. Let me say this.
Standard is.
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me say this, Tammi. I think what's important is when people say they see her, I want to remind folks that she was just, we're dealing with the war in Ukraine with Russia's invaded Ukraine. The White House just sent her to Europe to meet with European leaders to deal with the issue in Ukraine. And the other thing is, what happens is traditionally is, and like I said, having my experience working on the Hill, is a vice president is given a few issues to work on. And they will typically work on those issues, but they are not supposed to be in the public eye a lot. Now, I think what's important, and once again, is context, is that the last administration with Pence, you saw him more out in the public because he oversaw the COVID. He oversaw all activities related to COVID for the Trump administration. So you saw him in public a lot, particularly the last couple of months of the administration. So I think context is really important in terms of when we talk about VPs not being out in public. Joe Biden, you really saw him in public, and that's the way it's supposed to be. The VP is not supposed to outshine the president of the United States.
Well, I think we can go back to what Katrina was talking about earlier when we talk about the perception that this administration has given off. This is where it has hurt President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris is when they were running, she was everywhere. She was the front man when they were running. When they were on the campaign, we saw her all the time. Hey, Joe, we did it, Joe. And now all of a sudden we don't see her. So it's the perception, I believe, that's hurting them. Because if it's like you say, Dr. Walker, and we're not really supposed to see the vice president as much as we're fiending to see Kamala Harris, then it's the fault of the administration for putting her out front in the first place as much as they did just to win the presidency at all. Katrina, go ahead.
Well, Tammy, you and I both know why she was put out front during the campaign.
Absolutely.
Okay? And this goes back to what I said before. Campaigning is different from governing. And so now that we're in the governing aspect, she's not out front, right? But then we put her out front when we're trying to address the January 6th debacle. Right. We want her to be the front man, the angry Black woman in front of the cameras to talk about that. But when we talk about leading and doing things that are measurable in progress and impact to the Black community, she needs to be the person out front for that, because she is the person that the Black community is looking to say, hey, can you balance President Biden out to make sure that he does things that are impactful to the Black community that you all promised us on the campaign trail? And we have not seen that. And we will not see that, because that is not what this was designed to do. I think Vice President Harris does have an opportunity to turn this around, but I think there's some synergy lacking in this administration, first of all, where she has not been utilized in a manner that she could be most impactful. Like our other panelists said, Dr. Walker said about Pence being basically the front man for the COVID pandemic. There's an opportunity to use Vice President Harris when we're talking about the criminal justice reform that Black people are looking to see. That is her background. That is her area for redemption. So if we're looking to see our VP be in a position to run for president after this administration, put her in a position where she can show that she has the ability to lead, that she has the ability to be the person that the Black community is looking for her to be. If we haven't made appointments to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, she should be the person that's out front saying, hey, this is what our plan is. This is what we're going to do to decarcerate those who are incarcerated for low-level drug crimes or nonviolent crimes. These are things that the Black community is looking for. It's not misogynistic to ask for that. As a matter of fact, you're talking to a state senator who sat in a state Senate with 33 senators and 5 Democrats, only 2 Black women or 3 Black women at a time. There are things that Black women have to be responsible for in government that we should not have to hold the burden for. Yes, I understand that, but I don't think it's a ridiculously high standard to have VP Harris in front leading for Black issues.
Yeah, and when we look at situations like that, these are the things that make Black people think this administration doesn't care about Black people. Go ahead, Wakinya.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that stood out to me as we're having this conversation. One, I want to go back to Dr. Larry's points around what the role of the VP is and how she's not supposed to be there to overshadow the president. She has a job to make sure she's pushing forth his agenda. Now, when you talked about before, just on the variety of issues that are taking precedent right now, we had border crises, we are on the brink of a third world war. I mean, like, there are so many other things, and it's not to diminish any of the things that are of immediate concern to Black people, but I think everything happens in timing. And you also have to think about it. They are not placed in a unilateral position. Like, some of the things that we want to see done actually need to be done through Congress. And so there's some accountability there that also has to come to the forefront. As well. I don't disagree that, this administration needs to say more about what it is that their plans are as it relates to the issues that are important to the Black community. But I think we have to look at it in the context of time, in terms of like what things are and what we can actually get done. Someone mentioned earlier, there's a difference between campaigning and governing. Well, that's exactly right. And so in order to do a lot of these things that we're talking about, we need some responsible government, which also includes a balanced budget to be passed, which we haven't had in more than a decade.
I want to say something as well.
Please.
I think what we're missing is consistency, and I think that's what the previous before I forgot her name, but I think that's what she was saying. Basically, what we're missing is consistency. And if you're one way, I know that she said that there's a difference between governing and campaigning, but I believe if you're one way during one time, you should be the same way during another time. It's all about consistency, in my opinion, and delivering on what you say you're going to do. I don't think that she should be overshadowing President Biden, but I think she should still be showing up in the way that she feels is best, or the way that we know to be best.
Yeah.
And
Katrina,
Tammy,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, to Joaquina's point, no, they're not in a unilateral position. I do understand that. However, her job is to help push forth President Biden's agenda, which is one that she agreed to as she agreed to be his running mate. And part of that agenda is the Black agenda. And what we're talking about today is how their approval rating has impacted Black America. And so I think that is the lane, that is the opportunity for Vice President Harris to operate in. Not necessarily that we hold her to a standard where she should be, lockstep with the president, but she should be the person who shows up to say, hey, this is what we campaigned on. Where are we on this? Or we can't pull back on another initiative. This is initiative number 10 that we're telling the Black community that we cannot do.
And I guess we don't know if she's saying that or not. But Dr. Walker, Katrina mentioned some things that could happen that could potentially turn these low ratings around. What do you think can be done with Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden to turn these low approval ratings right side up again?
So I'm going to go back to a point I made earlier. I just saw a poll last week that showed individuals like from 21 to 40. That's the group that really the poll numbers have dropped the most. So you know what you need to do with that? You need to make sure you sign an executive order when it comes to, when we talked about student loans. I mean, we talked about it earlier, joked about it, but let's be clear. African Americans bear the burden of student loan debt in the United States. That prevents Black folks from buying homes, from buying cars, from saving money, etc. So I think the first step they need to do, and President Biden has been hesitant to do this. Well, actually, he's actually said he won't do it, but he needs to sign an executive order to make sure the folks in that, well, let's keep going 21 and keep going up in terms of the demographic that would benefit from getting any kind of student loan relief. That he has to do that immediately, and he can't wait to 2 months before November. He needs to do it now because he needs the kind of momentum you need. It's important every day.
And I got to take a commercial break now. Back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack, where the business of being Black today is Joe Biden's low ratings, his approval ratings, Vice President Kamala Harris's low approval ratings. Oh my goodness, this is just horrible. So what does the Biden administration need to do to up these numbers, Joaquina?
One, they have to meet voters where they are. I think Dr. Larry said it in the previous segment. They need to really focus in on that middle age of group of Americans. Those are who of us who are I like to call us the original millennials. Those of us who are a little bit 30 plus. And who have done everything that we've been told to do here in America. We went to school, we went out and got a good job, we're trying to pay it forward, but we can't do it under the burden of these student loans. We keep being asked to kind of pull everybody else along with us. We keep paying into a system that we won't benefit from. We won't get anything from Social Security, but we're paying it for generations either before us or after us. And that's what I think it's something to be said about what he's doing for those of us who fall dead smack in the middle. We need some economic relief as well. We're always asked to bear the burden for everyone else because we're younger, perceived to be healthier, etc. But what does it mean to be young and healthy if you can't afford to start a family or you can't afford to buy a home? Like, what does that mean to be that and live here in America and still be asked to give so much of ourselves all the time? So I think he has to absolutely meet the voters where we are.
You are me, I am you in this sense. You wear many hats, Joaquina, Democratic strategist, advisor, plus size model. What are you working on at the moment? What do you want to
On the moment, I'm working on how to eradicate poverty in Mississippi. That's a passion place for me. It's my home state. And so I'm leaned into that, but I'm also working on a number of different solo projects and really excited about the creatives that I get to put out. So more to come on that, Tammi.
Thank you so much. We'll be waiting. Sharice, what can you tell us about your YouTube content?
Right. So I am coming back. I've been kind of ghost lately. I had a lot going on, but I will be coming back to YouTube.
You gotta go ghost. You gotta get
Yes. I will be coming back to YouTube. Looking for a studio to start recording in because usually it's just my house, obviously. But yeah, looking for a studio and and finding more people to interview. I think I want to do more interviews this time around instead of me just making content, interviewing more people. And also, besides YouTube, I'm going back to school. I am pretty young. I guess I'm like 23. So going back to school in August. Actually, I want to go to UCF. That's where our counterpart is a professor at, or assistant professor. So UCF.
Maybe there's a connection there.
Absolutely.
Nudge you there. Maybe there's some scholarship availability, so you won't have to worry about
I need that.
loans we talking about getting back. Speaking of, Dr. Walker, please talk to us about how you've teamed up with Roland Martin.
Yes, so Tammi, you can catch me on Roland Martin Thursday nights, 6 to 8, discussing some of the important topics you're talking about right now. And if my colleague's interested in UCF, she can feel free to stay in contact, and I'll see how I can help her.
That's divine.
I'm excited.
Talk to me. Your book, Raw, Real, and Inspiring.
Yeah, so I'm working on my transition out of governing and moving more into.
We need you there, sis. We need you there.
Well, I'm going to be there in spirit and in truth, honey. So I'm helping candidates get elected. I'm helping people train to become political operatives because we have so many candidates and not enough campaign managers. I'm writing my book. I'm also working on a docuseries called Blackmail, which explores America's attack on Black political power through abuse of the criminal justice system. Wow. And there's just so much more that's coming in store. So just make sure that people go to my website, thekatrinarobinson.com, for more information.
So what chance do you give the Democrats of holding on to control in the Senate and the House, Katrina?
Right now, it's hard to tell because we're still early in this administration. And I don't really know how people feel about coming towards these midterms, but I'm hoping
we do know that 30% of them liking Joe Biden and the other 70% not feeling this administration.
I know, but I hope that it doesn't trickle down. I'll put it to you that way. And I think we have to do a better job. And that's why I'm more interested in offering commentary on a political scene, because our community needs to understand in layman's terms how this impacts them. But I think we have the opportunity to be impactful on the state level, on the local levels, to impact those elections and keep that power, because it's going to be hard if we lose it. It's really going to be hard.
Dr. Walker, what do you think? What do you think about the Democrats holding on to those seats?
So historically, the parties in power, the executive branch, faces struggles in the midterms most of the time. When you layer that with a pandemic and low approving ratings, there's a lot of, like my colleague just said, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think that utilizing VP Harris, to have her center out to various parts of the country, talk about the infrastructure bill, they talk about President Biden signing an executive order that tells with getting rid of student loans, among other things. I think that would be.
Listen, Donald Trump loved the executive order more than anything else, right?
Let me say this, Tammi, and Dr. Walker brought this to light. The Biden administration has an issue with their messaging to the communities. And if they can, that's the one thing that President Trump was good at. He was good at staying on message and driving it home and getting it to everybody.
Whether it was the truth or a lie, he was very good at it.
Most of them lies.
Yeah.
But this administration needs to do a better job of communicating downward to local communities how they are working on their behalf. We're not hearing that. We're not seeing that. And I think, like I said before, that is an opportunity to use VP Harris because she is a familiar face that people want to see. We need to be able to get that message out to drive people to keep this majority. Other than that, we're going to lose them.
Why, Kenya, we did bring in President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris did bring in the big dog, Obama, not long ago. So, they are trying something.
It's a gentle reminder. It's a gentle reminder of how closely connected this president seeks to be with the community. But more so than that, I think when we look at it holistically, we still got a couple more months that we can make some change. I agree with everyone. Democrats in general, we do terrible on messaging. It's always been our worst part about communicating the good, right? And being and opening up the lines of transparency. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to do some more work there. But I think also there's a huge opportunity for us to utilize the folks who we have on the ground. We have a lot of folks on the ground who are effective messengers for their communities. We're not deploying those assets in the right way. And so I think if President Biden wants to really show and demonstrate what he's he's been doing in the community, in addition to leveraging Vice President Harris, he also has to deploy those same surrogates that he called on when he was campaigning and get them back out, utilizing them again to reinforce a lot of the messaging. There's a lot of money that's come down to states. Have folks out talking about how he's been making sure that that money's reaching their communities. I think that's a really effective opportunity for us to be able to exercise some of those resources.
Yeah, they definitely have to take the Will Smith approach and slap us with the message for sure.
No, Tammi, no.
Too soon? Too long?
I reserve my comment on that, Tammi.
Okay. So in one word, I want to know what has been the biggest achievement of the Biden administration in one word. Sharice, what you got?
I haven't seen anything, so I can't even give you a word. Honestly.
Dr. Walker, what you got?
COVID.
What can you?
Ports.
Oh, Katrina?
Infrastructure.
Well, look, we've just in those words, we've seen that he's done a lot of nothing. I don't know. But no, that's good to know. And they do need to drive that point home for sure. And I'm driving it on home too. Cocktails with the Queens are up next. That is Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Foxsoul. Thank you so much, Katrina, Dr. Walker, Sharice, and Wakinya.